I'm sorry there's no color copies. I've still yet to actually figure out the color printer at school. It's one of those.
We don't like it when you find that out.
We have 2 of them, and I stopped fighting with them. Yeah, I was like, I'm done.
I just got it straight away. Just whenever you're ready. Start.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and get rolling. I would love just to start out with where you guys teach and your name. And I know we're a small group, so you don't have to raise hands or anything. And we'll start over here.
My name is Jamie Caldwell. I teach sports medicine
Great.
in Vista Academy, which is in Denver Public Schools.
Great.
High school.
Great. Welcome.
My name is Rosie, and I'm the assistant principal over at Swivl Westwood. First year there, formerly at elementary school as a first and fifth grade teacher and teacher leader for the district.
Great.
I'm Sharon Rossi. I'm a teacher on special assignment for District 20 in Colorado Springs.
Hi, I'm Nellie Barrett. I teach here at DCS at Fairmont, and I teach the early childhood special ed.
Great.
I'm Letitia Austin. I also teach here at DCS Fairmont, and I teach fifth grade reading.
Great. You guys have a beautiful school.
Thank you.
Yes.
Amazing.
I'm Charlie Ryder. I teach first grade at DCIS at Fairmont, so down the hallway a bit. It's my 6th year teaching.
My name is Hunter Chambers, and I actually teach in Colorado Springs, high school, 9th to 11th art, and it's my 5th year teaching.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Chris Carter. This is my 10th year in education. I started out with Teach for America and was placed in the Arkansas Delta area, and I had to look that up on a map. When they told me I was going to Arkansas, I was originally from Connecticut, so I wasn't sure where that was. I taught high school social studies for about 3 years, and then moved on to staff with Teach for America. And I did the professional development continuum for 500 teachers that supported 40,000 students in Arkansas and Mississippi. Got my principal license through the Teachers College at Columbia, and opened a charter high school, college prep high school in Arkansas. And then after doing that, I sort of migrated my way west, which is apparently what most people do at some point. This is my 2nd year, and I'm at Strive Prep, and I teach. I was also a founding board member for another charter school in Arkansas. So I've been in charter schools for a while. I love them. And I went back to teaching because I love kids. And after working with adults for a while, it was fun. It was also fun to get back with children. So it's exciting to be here with you guys today. I asked my students the other week, I said, what are the 2 political parties? And they said Republicans and Dominicans. So I have quite a bit of teaching that I need to do this year, and I'm excited to get into it and be here with you guys. My daughter is in 5th grade, and she is at Lowry Elementary, so we live on the southeast side. And it's amazing to listen to her. I learn a lot from children, from her and from my kids. And there's zombies on the playground. There's this group of boys right at lunch. She's in kindergarten. And they've been like massing in numbers and taking over. And so she asked one night, she says, well, what can I do about this? And we said, well, have you thought about making up your own team? And she's like, I'll make up a dragon team. And so she got all the girls together, and they're the dragons. And last night she said, you know, we're doing good. And I said, well, why? And she said, we got a boy to come over, from the zombies to the dragons. And so this is sort of in way of introduction to the topic. The topic of this session is about how you can unleash your teacher leadership in your school and what that looks like. Much like my daughter has been trying to figure out how to unleash her leadership on the playground over the zombies. So we'll look at a couple of examples today. The first thing I want you to do is just to think. And this is a handout that I normally give my kids every day. I don't do more than a 1-pager in high school. And we have 85-minute classes, and it's just a way for us to organize our thinking. So take about 2 minutes on the top, and it's a T-chart, sort of boxes. List all the reasons that you can think of that teachers lead and teachers lead in the classroom. count up how many you have in each column and write that number at the bottom. Raise your hand if you have if you identified more reasons for teachers leaving than leaving. Okay. And raise your hand if you have more leading than leaving. About the same. It's interesting. Every time I do this, you tend to usually end up with more negative reasons than you do positive. Also, if you do this in the classroom with students around social emotional learning, right? Name positive feelings and negative feelings. They can always name more negative feelings than they can positive. And that tends to also transfer over to adults, right? In the school, in the classroom. What were just a couple of reasons that you guys identified? We'll just go around for each person. Just name one, either leading or leaving.
Leaving, I put lack of admin support.
Okay, support.
Check. Maybe like this combination of like a larger sense that the profession isn't respected and that you have this sense of voicelessness in the larger national dialogue of education as a teacher. And this is your craft.
Okay. No support, no respect, no voice.
Mine kind of follows some of those too.
Okay.
The top-down administration.
Okay.
We can do either one, right?
Yeah, anyone.
Okay, so for leading, I think to create change.
Okay. Cause change. Good.
One for leave is overwhelming expectations, unattainable expectations, and then one for leading, just like we all want to be that like one teacher that we really all are, that one teacher to make a change. We have the drive to be that leader or that mentor teacher or that administrator that can be the difference or be the change. Does that make sense?
It does. Going back to the starfish. Yes.
I put the same word on both sides actually.
Okay.
And that word was challenge. And then I put a slash on the leaving side. I put challenge / pressure. And that kind of builds off what the teacher was saying of like, sometimes that challenge is literally beyond what one reasonable human can accomplish, which sets you up for feeling failure. And then on the leading side, I put challenge / fun, because sometimes a challenge is fun. And I know one of the things I like about teaching is problem solving and figuring out the issues I have going on. But it's just a matter of like, those two different sides of the same coin.
Wow. That was my key point, Charlie.
Breakout session done,
Done.
right there.
Our student.
So for, I think it's fitting that a lot of us have some of the same things, but, so I have most of those things already done, but, pay for leave.
Yeah.
And then the answer for that on the lead side would be humility. Because I know people who've been great teachers, that like, to be honest, if you have like too much self-respect, you might
Sure.
just like not want to do it anymore, because you just can't.
Sure.
Maybe require some humility.
So our theory today is that all of these things are actually positive, and they can help you lead. To the idea that challenge can be on both sides. So that's sort of the theory behind how can you garner or marshal your leadership and the leadership of others in your school, and that you have to see all of your disadvantages as your strongest assets. And figuring out how to flip your mind on that and how to flip your principal's mind, or the people that support you on that, is our challenge today. The other interesting piece in this, before we get to the Malcolm Gladwell video, has anybody read his books? He's got some really interesting ideas. Some of them are a little bit more grounded in data than others, but they're really interesting ideas on how we can sort of flip how we look at our profession and our leadership. Before we get to that, there was a report that came out this fall from the TNTP, the New Teacher Project. It's called The Mirage, and I pulled out just a couple pages of it that I thought might be helpful for our discussion today as we dig deeper into how do we flip this model so that we see ourselves as leaders and see more people as leaders in the classroom and school. So I would love for you just to take 5 minutes. You can linger on whatever page you'd like to linger on. It's a pretty beefy report, so I just pulled out, I think, 5 pages. And we'll just take 5 minutes to kind of be silent with that and then come back together. don't we come back together? It's a 58 plus page report. If you ever have time to sort of print it out or download it and read the whole thing, it's very, very interesting. Some of the ideas that they suggest that work or might work in the future. Take a minute, if you go down to the bottom of page 1 on your handout, just make note of sort of one key takeaway or one key insight. And as I tell my students, it's Common Core, you have to justify your answers, so cite the evidence, right? Could be a page number or a number or fact that stuck out to you, so take a minute to write down one key insight and one fact or piece of evidence or question that you have. All right, let's come back together. I just want to share out again just for a little bit. Then we'll get to sort of what is the meat of the session, or the burger between the buns, is sort of Malcolm Gladwell's take and a couple of examples to lead our discussion. One of the things that sort of my takeaway was, so we'll share takeaways and questions, would love to hear from everybody, is my daughter, we were at REI, I always like sharing stories about my daughter, my kids love it. I think they hate it too, my students at some point. But she's 5 years old, and she was at REI the other weekend, and she was, have you guys been to REI? Right, she was upstairs, 3rd floor, there's a slide. It was like a little kids area. It's not as good as a kids area in Seattle, but. And she wanted to go down this slide, and this other child was in the way, and so she pushed the child down, right? And the first parenting instinct is, get over here, right? And so she did it. She knew that she did something wrong, and she came right over. We didn't have to say anything. She's like, can I try this again so I can do it the right way, right? She's a 5-year-old. We've never taught her that, but that's like her natural instinct, right, when she's in situations like this. And so when you look at the Mirage report, it's the idea of like redefining, reevaluating, reinventing. It's our natural instinct to just like jump on it and say that when someone doesn't do something, it's wrong, right? But in reality, she reached the outcome that we wanted. And we didn't have to be negative. We didn't have to be critical at all, right? We just had to be there to support her, right, in making those right decisions. So when I think about this report, I think about that and how can we create schools and systems that function like that instead of functioning like you did something wrong, let's have a conversation about that. You know, when that person can do the right thing and can do it on their own, they just need the right environment, right? What are some takeaways or questions you have when you read this? And we'll start in the back and work our way forward this time. Okay.
2 key insights. I said I love the idea of balancing investments and development with recruitment, compensation, and smart retention.
Okay.
So balance maybe is a good word.
Okay.
And then sort of piggybacking off of that, reconstructing the teacher's job. I think we all sort of feel that like part of the weight is just like how much is in our jurisdiction.
Yep.
And how much we have to deal with. I was just complaining about like losing a planning period to like a kid whose ankle is broken and needs to get homework, and then this kid who hasn't turned in 3 weeks worth of work, and mom comes in like, I'm the one feeling all of that while trying to make copies and like prepare for the 5 classes I'm teaching. You know, it's just like Who can do that?
Yeah.
Who can do that? Without, reconstructing a teacher's job.
I like that, reconstructing. Good. What else are you guys thinking?
Did you say you wanted takeaways or questions?
Both, whichever sort of sticks out to you the most.
I mean, one big summary is that no one really knows how to do this yet. There
Yep.
is no, like, we can point to this and say unequivocally, this is absolutely how you develop and improve teachers. Evidence on page 1, where it essentially says, like, we were surprised when we found out that all our assumptions were wrong. So for me, it's just like kind of a big shrug in a way. Like, what do we do exactly? Here are suggestions, but they're even admitting, like, we had assumptions and they're wrong. So here are suggestions based on the discovery that we were wrong in the first place. It's kind of like, that's not very reassuring.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah.
Right? It's this huge, like, we just stopped the ship, we rolled up the sails, and they're like, where are we going? What do we do?
So part of it to me is like what he was saying about recruitment. Like, if you changed, maybe it has nothing to do with how we structure it. Maybe it's literally recruiting the right people. And if you raise teacher pay, you'd attract more competent. Like, that's kind of the thing that my brain goes to is like, well, if there are all these different ways that we're doing it in all these different districts and all these different charter networks, then maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe it's purely talent recruitment.
So the takeaway was built off of what Hunter was saying, like ongoing development through building off that, ongoing development, providing the right supports through beneficial coaching instead of just the we gotcha, like, and then nothing. On the flip of that though, I have taught in 6 different districts. One little district was a charter network, which I love. So like the first couple pages kind of, as an 11-year teacher, like I kind of took a little offense to it of comparing a veteran's teacher's like pursuit of PD versus a brand new teacher. Having taught for that long and having taught in multiple districts though, I've also seen a huge discrepancy in the quality of PD that is provided and in the diversity of PD that is provided. So my question is whether or not they looked at that piece. I know I'm talking out, like I'm a DPS teacher, but DPS in one other district have, in my experience, have some of like the most frustrating PDs I've been to, that it's incredibly repetitive. I watched the same, I've heard other teachers be like, I have watched the same video for this ELA class that I've had to take 12 different times. So is that really a veteran teacher saying, I don't need any more training? Or is it more so that the district has maxed out on its ability to support that teacher?
The biggest critique of this report that people say is, look at the idea of PD that teachers hold and look at the idea of PD that districts hold. Why are they so different? Right? Districts say, I gave you the professional development. You have a literacy coach, you have a math coach, you have planning time, you have these modules online, right? You have these professional development days, right? You have the PD, so why is it that every time I survey you, you say I'm not getting the PD I need?
Because the coaches taught for less time than the teachers.
So it's a huge critique of this report. And a lot of the districts will say, we're doing what we need to, and the teachers will say you're not, because they're so far apart on the definition of what professional development is.
Well, and like when I taught in San Diego City Schools, it was my first year teaching, but I immediately, as a new teacher, the district had just made a partnership basically with Marie Clay and Lynn Regent, the ladies who wrote Observation Study. They actually both of them were on site on a 2-year contract in schools within San Diego City Schools to get reading workshop focused, to get guided reading focused, and to provide those teachers with focused intervention strategies based on research, based on sure, they had tons of coaches, but the district acknowledged we need to step up our game. When I taught in Round Rock ISD in Texas, it was the same thing. Like, they realized, okay, science, PD, like, we've reached a plateau. So what did they do? They partnered with Rice University and created what they call STEM Scopes, which is an amazing curriculum, but also provided training, and everything was based on teacher feedback. And it wasn't just, okay, admin and coaches, tell us what's going on. It was a connection back to the classroom. Is it effective or not? And sure enough, 2 years into our adoption, they realized, oh, from all this feedback we're getting, we've got to change things. So they relaunched a whole new thing the following year, and it's still ongoing with teacher support.
Yep.
And other districts that I've taught in, it's literally like, well, this is what we've offered, this is what we've always offered, this is what it's gonna be.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Teacher feedback's a huge part of that. Let's hear from a few others.
I kind of touched on the teacher feedback in mine too, just about that percentage that 85% of teachers in this study or whatever, didn't admit to having any weaknesses in their practice, and I think that self-awareness is really, really hard. And I know when I've been at PDs, it's like banging your head up against a wall almost, because it's like no one is gonna admit that they need help or that they are struggling in something, so it's like, what's the point of even being there? And I know it's probably hard from the district standpoint to try to develop PDs when everyone's saying that they don't need help and they're perfect, and, you know, really having that self-awareness to grow. Like, you can't grow without realizing that there's room to grow.
Yeah.
And I think that has to do also with, in conjunction with like our teacher assessment pieces. Like, I feel like LEAP being on 2 different campuses now, one, it's used as a growth tool, the other, it's literally a checklist.
Yeah.
And if you're having a shitty day like that,
Right.
the principal's gonna be like, all right, well, you're a 1. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, there's no discrepancy for real life in the classroom.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of conversation, like,
No.
oh, this was this day, or this is actually what I'm having a hard time with, can you come see this? It's like
Right.
they come in when they come in, and that's it.
Yep.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and to build off of right where you're looking, Ellie, on page 2, this kind of, that even the few teachers who did earn low ratings seem to reject them, yada, yada, less than half of teachers surveyed agreed that they were weakness. But also this part, kind of right above it where it talks about what it calls a pervasive culture of low expectations for teacher development and performance. And I'm reminded of like one of my favorite little catchphrases, which I've always thought about in the context of a classroom, which is that if nobody's learning, nobody's teaching.
Yep.
But also thinking about this study and how we have kind of like a pervasive lack of accountability to apply that to professional development and to leadership and to district level leadership. So if nobody's learning, e.g. teachers aren't learning, and you don't have substantial evidence to show that teachers are developing their skills, then nobody's teaching,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
From an administrative standpoint, and, you know, moreover from a district standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hear one more, and then we've got to get into the video.
I was gonna say, it was when Charlie was talking, goes back to the encourage improvement with meaningful rewards / consequences, and I think you definitely had a piece of that, Charlie, when you were saying something about, you know, higher pay for those that are more skilled, and I think that would be a piece of that meaningful reward, instead of base, you know, flat rates, basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like you, by random chance, have 12 reacts in your class, someone else by random chance has 2, compensation there too, for the difficulty of the scenario that you're teaching. Yeah.
My favorite thing that I've encountered this year is stipends. This is my favorite thing ever, right? You're a leader. We're going to give you a stipend for it, but we're not going to give you any more time to do it.
Right.
Right? So now you're going to do your leadership after school when there are no teachers
Yeah.
and there are no students, right? Be a leader in the school.
Right.
And it's so divergent. Like, it just doesn't make sense at all, right?
In the
So-
past, you had like, be a leader, no money and no time.
Yeah.
Here's some money, be a leader.
Yeah. And
No,
it-
like, it really takes.
And
It's
that's
like-
my big concern
yeah.
with DPS role, because last year I was in a differentiated roles position, but it never, I was at Oakland and we just could never get subs, we could never like get it off the ground, so I was like a glorified teacher leader. My concern with the DR program though, seeing though now that we're dropping techs and we're dropping our coaches and stuff, is that now those roles are just going to get that much more. So not only are you now responsible for a classroom, yes, you have half-day release, but you're not released to go plan anything. You're released now to go teach and coach other teachers.
Yep.
And now they're being given the job of lead. They're given the job of coaching. They're given the job of also maintaining half the day's work of a classroom. Like, how is that sustainable?
And also maybe your principal signs you up to be the sound as well.
Yeah, like, it just doesn't, like, I really see, and I know people are, like, at the trainings this summer, I went to 6 days on it, even though I've already done it, and it was like, people are like, oh, but we love it, and then other people will be like, well, I've heard it really just depends on your principal. So again, where's that equity, where is that accountability for, if this is your role, how are we effectively supporting you instead of the district's way of, oh, we're gonna cut some money out of our budget and we're just gonna dump it back on our teachers. Like, that's truly how, I hate to be like the naysayer of that, because I think that that role could be so powerful.
Correct.
But I think DPS is handling it in such this like, oh, well, they can handle it. We've thrown everything else at them. Like, why not just make a teacher do that much more? So where is that real balance of being a teacher effectiveness coach or a differentiated roles position so that, you know, you are an on-campus teacher leader versus, yes, I'm doing it to the best I can within this small capacity of which they've granted me. Like,
so in 20 minutes, you're going to have an answer to that. So we're going to spend probably about 3 or 4 minutes maybe on the video. And I'm happy to share the link with you afterwards. It's a really great reflective piece for any teacher professional. And then we'll see if we can take his ideas to flip all of these things that we say are wrong into assets that will position us to be advocates and change agents in our school. And it doesn't, the challenge with us in teaching right now is we think that for some of these problems we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. When really we just have to sort of turn the baby a different direction, right? And keep the water and still accomplish what we need to. So let's watch this for a couple of minutes. If you turn your handout over, there's, I think, maybe the one-pager. There's a few reflection questions. You're welcome to use those as you watch the video or just engage in the video with your mind.
Adam Grant, organizational psychologist here at Wharton. Delighted to interview Malcolm Gladwell.
You guys hear it?
Malcolm, welcome. So let's start talking about your latest blockbuster, David and Goliath. Give us the core message and idea for you.
Well, it's just an examination of the idea of advantage, and particularly looking at when we see asymmetrical conflict. The conflict between one very large and one not so large party. How do we account for the unusual numbers of successes that underdogs have in those situations? And that sort of, the book sort of takes off from there to try and figure out whether our assumptions about what makes for an advantage are accurate.
Could we just be wrong about who has the advantage in the first place? So we've labeled somebody an underdog, in fact they're not? Or is it more complicated than that?
Well, I mean, the opening story chapter in the book is about the actual retelling of the biblical story of David and Goliath. And there it's very clear, David is not in any sense the underdog. Properly understood, once he has decided to change the rules of the conflict, the sling in his hand is such a devastating weapon that no contemporary observer of that battle would have thought David was a long shot. They would have, once they realized he was winding up with a sling, they would have realized that he had all of the cards. So there is some of that, and that we're misled by the narrowness of our assumptions about what constitutes an advantage in a given situation.
And that plays out in a wide range of circumstances in the book. So talk to us a little bit about desirable difficulties.
Yeah, so that's a notion taken straight from the psychological literature, from the work of the Bjorks at UCLA. And they were interested in that in the context of learning theory. It is not always the case that if I make the task of learning something easier for you, that your performance will improve. There are sometimes cases where your performance will improve if I make the task of learning more difficult for you. Not always, but what they do is they draw a line between difficulties that are ultimately desirable and those that are not. And so I sort of play with that idea in a number of contexts and sort of figure out, are there cases when having dyslexia is a desirable difficulty? That is to say, where you end up being better off than you were before. And the answer is there is a small number of cases where it's plainly the case that, or at least according to those who have dyslexia and who have achieved enormous success, particularly entrepreneurs are those, that's the group that's most interesting here. We see so many entrepreneurs who have dyslexia. And when you talk to them, they will tell you they succeeded not in spite of their disability, but because of it. And so for them, they view their disability as desirable, ultimately. And that's interesting. And that is that suggests that there are that the distribution of responses to an obstacle are profoundly bimodal. And I think we pretend they're not. Similarly, I look at this weird association between very successful people and having lost a parent, the fact of having lost a parent in childhood.
Not a desirable difficulty.
For some small number of people, parental loss appears to be ultimately a desirable difficulty. Again, not a large number, but it's sort of there does seem to be a class of obstacles that for some people, for whatever reason, have an advantageous outcome.
Where do you draw the line? So what is it that differentiates people who end up on one side of the distribution versus those for whom the obstacle is just insurmountable?
I think you can't draw a bright line. It's not really a perfect, we can speculate. For example, if you look at the class of dyslexics who end up as successful entrepreneurs, they obviously have certain things in common. They tend to be highly intelligent. I interviewed maybe a dozen of them. In every case, almost every case, the successful dyslexic had one family member who always believed in them. So one way of saying is, okay, so if your only obstacle is dyslexia, then it could be desirable. But if we say, so a child who grows up in a low-income neighborhood, who has an average IQ, who has a troubled family life, and has dyslexia, it's not going to be desirable. You've got too many obstacles to deal with. But if we start limiting the number of obstacles, then maybe it's different. So that's one idea, that perhaps it's just a kind of sheer. Another has to do with attitude.
What's his takeaway? Or what are a couple of his takeaways? And that was number one, he's not the greatest public speaker, right? He's got great hair. And he can go on and on. He has many, many examples because part of the way he does research is he talks to people. He doesn't just collect data, which is what some people's methodology is. He likes to talk to people and make connections between multiple stories, which is an interesting way, right? That's the qualitative data versus the quantitative. And so he bases a lot of his assumptions and theories and understandings on that. And that is also a way that we don't always look at teaching or learning, right? We want to have the standardized test, the standardized rubric. And sometimes that limits our capacity to see, right, what's going on or connections that are being made. What are some of the takeaways that you guys understand from the first 5 minutes?
Despite what your says, I'm like, but you can still persevere, you can still find a way through it.
Yep.
There's still, with those negativities in life might be, can still turn into positive.
Yep.
Something that is still just as troubling. I know he's trying to deliver some positive information for me. I know he's trying to. Like my kids don't have the fortune of being born straight, white, privileged, educated males.
Yep.
And so, I don't teach one of those kids.
Yep.
So, wouldn't we all love a desirable difficulty? And it's desirable because we have a host of other factors that make our life easier. And so I don't have that with my kids, and that's a very difficult pill to swallow with
Yep.
with the positive message, because it's like, right, yeah, we don't have those things. So that's sort of something I'm struggling with.
Well, and I think he almost, like, while he was saying the positivity piece, like, you can still be down, he was still even saying, again, it's still only a small percentage.
Yep.
So how are we serving
Right.
all of those other kids? Like, I get the, yay, you can
do it.
Yes, but at the same time, I mean, I felt that way last year, like this hopeless feeling. Like, my voice as their first grade teacher was only going to be so loud.
Yep.
Because the very next day, or they go home, like, someone who is that much more meaningful or that much more, even just present in their life, is going to be louder than me and going to have that role much longer than I will.
Yep. That being said, I think maybe I can.
It's a weird balance.
I can twist it this way. That maybe what has held us back is a mentality. What's held us back is the looking at it from so many negative places, and so that's kind of why the cards feel stacked. I see where you're going with it. And so much of what Kyle was saying too is that, like, the answers they don't need to come from other people. The answers don't need to come from a different part of the city or a different part of the country. The answers are right here. I understand that. I think what's difficult is to rationalize, like, what I can see as a teacher versus, like, what that kid sees when they look at the entire United States and the culture, the way that,
I think it depends on, like, your perspective. Like, as a special education teacher, hearing him talk about having dyslexia as kind of a blessing, and the whole idea of neurodiversity and really celebrating the way that different kids learn and think, and having kids that come from poverty, who have severe disabilities in my class, but seeing them overcome the challenges and seeing that become a really powerful tool, not only for them, but their families, their community, our school, and being uplifted by that and almost like inspired by that. I think it's just like, it depends on your perspective and who your students are and who you work with day in and day out. But, like, for me, like, that was like exactly what I feel, where it's like, oh yeah, you have these challenges, but look at what you can do and look at how powerful they can be and how they can motivate you, and even little tiny successes can be huge things to be celebrated, and that there's really not like a lot of challenges that, like, you can overcome, like.
Yep.
And I think, he gets kind of into the weeds here as an orator, but I read the book, so on paper he's a little more organized. But this idea of, if we think about our students as having just like a host of desirable difficulties, and thinking about the mindset looking forward of the real question is, how do we harness them? How do we channel the power of those things? And not getting lost with, I think, what his main point is in the text, which is making assumptions that do not overstand our students correctly and their life circumstances to how those things might feel here. Right? And how we can do that.
I think though too, with that, and I'm just comparing, like, my year last year at a different campus is just like exuding from this. Like, it was this, my babies could do amazing things despite where they can't. I mean, I had first graders that came in, didn't know their letters, didn't know numbers. Like, it was like teaching ECET2 all in one grade, like all in 1 year. And it's like, you have to do it. They have to show 2 years of growth. And I'm like, how are they going to show 2 years of growth if they don't even have like a foundation? And it's that, like, empowering that belief as a teacher. But I also, on the flip of that, on like the admin and like the district side of that, felt that they saw that campus as just every other low-performing campus in the upper Northeast, and this is how we're going to treat it. And it was like, we got allotted the same amount of things. And so, like, with that lens, like that empowerment lens, I think teachers are much quicker to have it. But I think it's looking at like the top down, the top tends to miss those pieces. And the top 10, and that's where I think those frustrations kick in. I'm not given the support we need. Like the campus I was at, we had one of the gave us a half-time mental health person. Like, she had 80 plus kids on her caseload for a half-time position. Like, how are we doing a service? And that's kind of where no matter what I do, I'm 9 months of that child's life, especially in that setting. Like, they're gonna go from year to year of a district or an administrator deciding, well, no, I'm gonna cut this, I'm gonna cut this. And like I just found out with that campus, as a campus team of teachers, they decided on their SAC committee what they wanted was an additional sped teacher. Because they ended the year with one teacher with over 70 kids on her caseload. Well, they suddenly had a fall rib, I guess, and they're down to now 1.5 sped teachers. And it's like, how are we truly embracing those differences and showing them that that it's an empowerment when we can't even meet like the basic functioning needs? And I think that's where those discrepancies within districts, within schools, anywhere, like when you just have this mindset of this campus is going to be the same as every other campus up here in the upper northeast or the far northeast. Door closed, we don't have to deal with it. Now you make it run, you be successful. Like, it's what message are we then sending to those kids where teachers' voices are basically overrun of saying, yes, you can do this, yay, you have this success. And like, yes, every one of those moments was amazing every time we hit it. On the backside, though, the kids that didn't experience it was like, you get beat in the head again as a teacher of, oh, well, you didn't do it well enough, or you didn't do it big enough, or you like, yeah, nope, we're not gonna get them. Or no, they're not bad enough to get those supports, or they're not low enough to get this. And it's like, are they not low enough in comparison to this campus population? Because in reality, if you compare them out across the district, the whole campus as a whole is, I mean, they were the lowest performing school in the state. Like, where is that ability to empower those differences to change if we as adults aren't there to support and provide?
So here it is.
Sorry.
In 5 minutes. Has anybody ever taught a 5-minute lesson?
Yes.
Yes, it's amazing, and it can be done, but on paper you're like, how's this gonna happen? So this is sort of the crux of the session, or where we want to take our voices. Is that conflict is good, it's not bad. So conflict is an advantage, it's not a disadvantage. And that's, when you look at teacher development, you have to flip that model, right? Because how administrators perceive it is conflict. If I have conflict with a teacher, this is a disadvantage, right? And then teachers also see it as a disadvantage because they want to teach, not be in conflict, right? But we have to embrace conflict. It has to be a good thing. Does anybody know Thomas Paine, right? Common Sense. My students read The Crisis this week, his December 1776 letter. And this is sort of my frame to them, and I bring it to this, and then we need to do one action plan. So we have a step to have our voices heard and to embrace conflict. As I told my students, I said, is there ever a moment in your life where you would be proud of getting your ass kicked on the playground, right? Most people are not proud of that. They're proud of when they get a cell phone. They're proud of when they get a car. They're proud of when they get, right, a phone, when they get a job, when they get paid, right? All of our pride revolves around material things, consuming material things that add value to us, right? And Thomas Paine was what he was telling Americans during the American Revolution is, people are killing us, taking our homes, burning our fields, because we have something that is amazing and that they want and that is great, right? But everybody kept seeing the American Revolution as a disadvantage until Thomas Paine started writing and saying, actually, this is a good thing. This is something you should be proud of. So as teachers and school leaders, we need to be proud that there's conflict, and we need to be proud that there's differences in diversity. And our job today, before we go, is to think of one challenge or conflict that you have. And you need to think about the David and Goliath example of how do you switch the roles in that conflict, right? Because that's a first step when you embrace conflict, is you have to switch roles so that now you have leadership in the conflict and not the other person. So on your paper for, let's say, a minute or two, and we don't have to do 3, we can do 1, but we're in the challenge column, think of a conflict or challenge you're facing at school that you'd like to overcome. Identify who is Goliath, right? Who is the favored person to win? Who is David, right? Who is not favored to win? And then the solution is flipping those roles, but then thinking about after you flip those roles, what do you want to achieve? And I'd love to hear from a couple people in a minute or two before we close out. It's 11:15. I would love to hear from one person kind of what you're thinking. We have a 15-minute break, but I also want to respect our break. So I don't want to bleed into that. What's somebody sort of thinking in terms of this model of embracing conflict? Courageous.
I'll go.
Okay.
My conflict was that between teachers, sped teachers in schools and the district sped department, there just seems to be this huge disconnect, constant battle, constant conflict between the two. So trying to see if we did flip the roles, would we as teachers gain perspective as to what they have to deal with day in and day out? Would they gain perspective as to why we are fighting so hard for these kids and who these kids are? They don't know who they are. They don't know their names, their situations. So would that even be beneficial? I don't know, but I just feel like it's interesting to look at it from a different perspective, I guess. Like, I don't know what they do all day. In my mind, I think they sit around and make judgment calls that are inappropriate, but maybe they have other things that they're doing and they have to do, and it's crazy for them, whereas they think that all we do is complain all day, so it's just like this constant battle, and I know it's throughout the district, but is it like, the solution would be, well, like, are we doing what's best for the students? Are we putting students first? And I think that's where I just don't know how, I don't know.
Building on that, it was something interesting happened at my school last year. My principal decided to shadow a student for a day, or be a student for a day. And the most positive changes that happened over the course of the entire year happened directly after that observation. And it totally switched our school in terms of having a more like student-centered culture, students having voices, right? And it was like little things, like you can't have a 2-minute passing period because no one pees, right? Like it's this little thing, and the teachers were happier and the kids were happier just by adding a couple minutes onto that and just making lunch just a little bit shorter, right? But it's these little switches and roles in the conflict help you see it differently and come to a solution much faster than if you just continue to do
Like shadowing a student or even shadowing a parent or a student with a disability, like do any of us really know what that's like and what they're dealing with if we're constantly telling them things or telling them to do things or what needs, you have no idea what they're really dealing with and what they're doing.
Absolutely.
I had a professor in a master's program that told me that where she taught in Australia, the whole And so it tied them back into that school culture and what the kids were going through, and really, she could always talk about how shocked she was that American schools did not have that tie-in, and she's like, no wonder the disconnects, because they're so far removed from, you know, your workforce, like your and your populations. So I always wonder if United States schools would actually switch that, like how much reform in education we would see and how much change we would see.
Yeah.
If you're interested, there are like things like
I know we have to go, but there was a sweet spot for that because my school went to the other extreme. Last year, we got rid of all administrative roles, and everybody who was a principal taught full-time. And there were a lot of changes. There were a lot of changes. But sometimes you do need some support.
Right.
Sometimes you do need a leader
Right,
to
yeah.
be there
Yeah.
for that. So we were all kind of islands unto ourselves, but like the executive founder of the school taught a full last year. It was like, you know, so it made a lot of really.
Well, and like she said, it's not that, like, they literally will just teach like one art class, or they will do one
Just
like
take something.
math section in first grade.
Right.
Just
Ear to the ground.
right, and then that develops those relationships too between parents and kids to like know their
Teachers trust their
administrator.
admin more.
I
Yeah.
brought that up
Yeah.
in my leaf
Yeah.
debriefs where I'm like, would you want to come in and just teach a
Sure, I can do
lesson
this.
and then we can discuss like what was going on or what you saw. I have, yeah. It hasn't happened yet. I still have a job too, so.
That's
But
funny
yeah.
you said, dude.
Here
I was
comes
literally
Coach
thinking.
Charlie, like, oh,
Yeah.
how am I gonna
Well,
flip this and like?
I was just thinking about like one of the ways to flip it would be to do your observations as like a lawyering moment
Yeah.
where it's like you should argue and fight for it, and I don't want to say combative, but be very assertive for yourself. And that was the kind of thing I was thinking. So just
Yeah,
say that.
yeah, I mean,
That was
like,
one of my-
if you're gonna go in and leave a third grade teacher, have you ever taught third grade?
Right,
Like, are you gonna go in and leave a EC class, have you ever taught EC? Do you know what that teacher is dealing with, or what, you know, so I just feel like, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's another interesting idea. I had an observer do this the other day. She came in, Diane Hardcastle, I don't know if you've met her, she's a good friend of mine. She's one of our managing directors and principals. And she was doing an observation instead of typing, which is what observers do. It's a very passive role in the classroom. She asked questions, just like she was a student. Right? And I learned more from that observation than any notes that I've ever been given. And it was a 10-minute observation. She was just being a student.
I think that was one of my
being a
best
teacher.
with my PO last year, our peer observer. That's what she would do every time. She wouldn't just sit and type, she'd come and
Restarting?
Yeah.
be a kid.
Stand
Like,
up.
she'd sit
Yeah.
on the rug
Okay.
and
I'm
ask
so sorry.
questions. That would be, it was great.
Yeah.
Just two.
You guys are great, thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoy hearing what you're doing in your schools, so thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Chris, good to
Yeah,
see you finally.
it's good to meet you, yeah. And I stopped getting emails.
We took care of it.
It took me a month.
This
I was
is not
like-
who,
Yeah.
Can't push
How is it over there this year? You guys having a good start?
yeah, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, so-
A lot of work. This is helpful, you know, because you get on the grind, and then you don't stop to take like stock from
Yeah.
a high enough.
Well, I'm recording our conversation.
Oh,
just
I
wanted to-
apologize.
No, it's okay.